Well, 32 years in prison at 18 years old, and today has gone on to become one of the loudest voices, largest voices when it comes back to the reentry space. We're going to dive into that today. Uh, we're going to dive into that today on Prison Bosses. But before we do so, first want to give you guys a welcome back to the Prison Bosses podcast, the number one podcast behind the walls, powered by Industrial Bank, one of the only banks in America intentionally creating financial access and opportunities for justice impacted individuals and communities too. And so, with that being said, I'm your host, Trent Griffin-Braaf. And on today's episode, we're going to challenge the way people think about prison a bit, how they think about punishment, accountability, and redemption. Our guest today is Jesse Crosson. At just 18 years old, Jesse was sentenced to 32 years in prison after making a life changing decision that could have defined the rest of his story forever. But instead of allowing prison to destroy him, he transformed himself from the inside out, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. After serving 19 years, Jesse earned a conditional pardon and walked out with a mission to prove people are more than the worst thing that they've ever done. And so today, he's the founder of Second Chance Foundation, a national recognized speaker and the author of The Best Part of Prison, and a leading voice in the conversation around redemption, rehabilitation, restorative justice, and reentry. And what makes this conversation powerful is that Jesse doesn't sugarcoat anything. I mean, he really talks about accountability. He talks about pain. He talks about transformation. And he talks about what really has to happen for someone to change their life after incarceration. And so, whether you're listening from behind the walls, working in the justice system, rebuilding after maybe conviction, or simply just trying to become a better version of yourself, this episode is for you. So, let's get into it. Jesse, welcome to Prison Bosses, my friend. How are you
Thank
doing?
you for having me. I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day. It's not raining. It's not 100 degrees. So I'd say it's a win.
It's a win-win, brother. And I'm honored to have you here with us today. Um, you know, considering your story and the things you've been through. And so with that said, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your beginnings look like?
Sure. So I'm back in a small town I grew up in Central Virginia. Grew up, kind of moved around, had parents that, had their own issues with substances and kind of behavior. That continued. I mean, my mom put my dad in the hospital when they went into their breakup and, just grew up kind of around that chaos. And thought it was normal, just like I think the rest of us do. We grow up and the only thing we see
Agreed.
is what we think is normal, or we think if there's something out there, like that's great, but that's not for people like me. That's for other people or people who are special or from a different neighborhood. But at the same time, I had opportunities, and I think a big part of my story was not knowing or not believing that I belonged, which is one of the
Mm,
reasons I do a lot of work in the juvenile center these days, because we'll bring in academic programs and workforce programs and trades, and the kids are like, yeah, that's great, but that's not for somebody like me. So I
talk
feel like a
about it.
lot of the work that we can do isn't just providing the resource, but it's actually helping shape the mindset that is willing and able to take advantage of the resource. And I didn't. I had a bunch of opportunities, and I either threw them away or just didn't really engage with them. Got strung out on cocaine, ended up committing a
Mm,
robbery and an unrelated non-fatal shooting, and am really lucky that people didn't die, because that very well could have been. That wasn't like a choice I made. That was just luck of health and good medical care. It was sentenced to 32 years in prison, which was twice the
mm,
high end of the sentencing guidelines. Was like not what I was expecting, but was
mm.
in a weird way, like the only thing that could stop me up to that point. Because I was on this crazy train, like I think a lot of us were. Like, I didn't think I was going anywhere. I didn't think I was going to be alive for that much longer. It didn't seem like
Right.
it really mattered. And when I was finally stopped and had to reckon with it, it was uncomfortable, but it made me believe that maybe there is a future. Like maybe it has to be behind
Mm,
bars for the next 30 years, but like there's
mm.
something I could do, or there's some person I could be, or some impact I could have. And in that small way, believing I could do that was easier than believing I could be successful out in the world, because growing
Right.
up, I just never thought that was possible.
Mm,
So in some ways, you talked about like the mental, physical, spiritual changes that I made. Prison became kind of like my boot camp. Like, I got really good in this limited environment, and I got really good at the tasks and really good at the duties and really good at the strategies. And then, I still wondered, would I be able to make it out in the world? Like, does this translate, or are people out in the world
true.
just like miles ahead of us? So
Right.
it's one of the things I wondered until things turned into a different direction.
And so Jesse, and thank you for that unpacking that. And I agree with you. I think a lot of our listeners can relate to having traumas as children, growing up in households, drug addiction in the household, or even themselves personally. And so, just a couple of quick questions for you. Did you ever have any run-ins with the law before this case came up?
I had one. I stole beer when I was 16. We were at a party and they ran out of beer. And there was a girl that I really liked who said, "Hey, is there any chance you could go get me?" I don't remember what it was, like some fruity mixed drink. And I was like, "Yes, I can." And my plan was to go get this drink and then come back. But we had stolen beer from a different supermarket before, and we just went to one we didn't know. And like they were intense. They chased us. Like
Mm,
employees came out of
mm.
there like with the SWAT team and like chased us down the road. And it was a crazy thing. But it was little dumb stuff
It
like
was
that, like
minor,
kid stuff
yeah.
like that I had done.
Nothing crazy. Yeah, nothing crazy. Now, and so I would imagine now, as an 18-year-old child who never really had anything too crazy run-ins with the law, and then now you're sitting in and you're talking real prison time. What are you thinking at that time? Like, what does your future look like?
So after the shooting, like I didn't know what happened. I went home and somebody called me the next morning and was like, "Yo, dudes are dead. Like I'm letting you know you need to
Mm,
get out of town." So I thought I
mm,
was facing murder charges. So in a weird way, when I was arrested with the SWAT team, with everything, the relief I felt when I saw malicious wounding instead of murder, I was like, "Oh, like okay, like they're alive. They're
right,
okay."
right.
So in a weird way, even though I was crushed or kind of crestfallen, I also felt some sense of hope because it turns out that they had both lived. Um, but yeah, I had no idea. It was like, but in a weird way, I had been like kind of going down or like kind of, stumbling down a hill, and all of a sudden I just fell off the cliff, and I could no longer pretend that I had any traction or no longer pretend I
Mm,
had any idea what was going on.
yep.
And so I really just kind of crashed and I hit the ground and like had a place to build myself up from where I couldn't go down any further. I had nothing else to lose.
Rock bottom. I think a lot of times for a lot of, so my story is, I put myself in prison at 18, drug charges, 12-year prison sentence. And I think when I look back at myself at that time, I didn't really have too many run-ins with the law before that. And so like to think I was an 18-year-old and looking at almost as long as I've lived in life already that I would have to spend behind bars. I just remember kind of at times feeling hopeless. And two, you started to, for me, like I had a split. I think you have a split too. But my split was the 4 to 12. And so then when I start to identify, well, maybe I could be home in 4 years, that started to give me hope. And then from there, I started to take college. So like, I guess my question is, what is did you have a moment while you were incarcerated that like was a aha moment for you? Like, I got to get my shit together and this is how I'm going to start.
For me, it wasn't like a moment or it wasn't a single path. It was a lot of back and forth
Mm,
because it was, when I was first arrested, it was just I was down on the bottom, but I started to have people believe in me and like send me letters and want to come visit me through the glass and made me feel like there was some hope.
hmm
And the day of sentencing, the midpoint of my guidelines called for 10 years, which to an 18-year-old kid felt like eternity. But when
Yes.
they ended up modifying the guidelines and giving me 32 years, I was back down at the bottom. I was like, well, there's no point.
Mm,
Like, I'm going to spend the rest, like, I can't even imagine 30 years. I don't know
mm,
what that is. We didn't have any parole in Virginia, so there was no early release. And
damn.
then I would slowly kind of build myself back up and start doing things, or somebody would believe in me, or I'd meet, a teacher or a counselor or somebody inside who made me believe in myself. And it really was just back and forth. But the consistent thing, and this is what I tell people all the time on the outside, is it was people who showed up and believed in me until I could believe in myself.
Mm,
Or people who showed up. I remember we had a guy who fought like hell to get out for 22 years. And then they let him. He was the first person I saw who was allowed to come back in to speak to us about the reentry process. And he
mm,
said, "I'm here because I want you to know you matter and you have a future." And like that meant the world to me because up till that point, I don't think I had believed anybody when they told me I mattered and I had a future. So
mm.
it really is the people that showed up and just like gave me an olive branch or gave me a hand up that allowed me to believe the future was possible. And it was each of those moments that I was reinvigorated. So no matter
Right.
how much I'd been worn down, that was when I was going to throw myself into studies or throw myself into reading or throw myself into tutoring or helping somebody else.
And so that being said, well, I've heard you say hope a few times. And I'm a firm believer that facilities, correctional facilities, um, places like that almost drain hope from people. Like they don't do a great job of making us feel hopeful in the future. And so, what sort of programmings or what sort of things did you do to better yourself once you had found this hope for yourself?
And that's I actually just went to go speak at a prison graduation the other day, and they're doing a lot more things now than like they we didn't have anything. The
That's
only
a fact.
program we had that was meaningful was the victim impact program, which was a restorative justice thing around like reckoning with the harm that we'd done.
Mm,
Everything else, all like I'll give you an example. They made me take an anger management class. I went to my interview and they said, "Hey, you haven't taken this class." I said, "Well, I applied. What do you want me to do?" And they were like, "Well, you didn't take it. We're gonna have to take your good time. Like you're gonna have to spend more time in prison." So I have
Damn.
to like write and complain and go. Turns out they don't have an anger management class. They were trying to like take my good time for a class they didn't even offer. But then the
Yeah.
result of that is I get called to the schoolroom one time and this teacher comes in or this counselor comes in, like slams stuff on the paper, stares straight at me and be like, "Well, apparently somebody thinks we need to have an F in anger management class because I don't have enough on my workload anyways." So then like just completely like expresses her anger at me for the next 6 weeks or whatever while I'm in this class. And it's like,
Mm,
this is the thing that's supposed to rehabilitate me. Like this is our idea of change. So I would
facts.
say the programs or the things that I did were in spite of the system rather than because of it.
That's and I think that's the truest thing. We oftentimes when we're in there, it's a reflection of the people running the programming, and people don't think about they're just regular humans too. And now if their workload gets heavy, we become the brunt of that punishment though. Like we're always the punching bag. And so you end up doing 18 years, correct? Off of your out of your sentence?
About 19 years, yeah.
19 years. And so, was there anything that you helped, anything particular that you prepared for while you were inside there that helped you to kick off your reentry journey as you were preparing to come home or once you were released?
So, I didn't think, I didn't know the day I woke up that I was going home. Like, I thought I had 10 more years left. I didn't
Oh,
think it was going to happen
gotcha.
that way. But early on, there were two
So
things that
wait,
I
so
did.
explain that story to us a little then.
So, I did a lot of stuff while I was inside. I was really fortunate to have like community sport and family sport. I was able to go to college. I was able to become a journeyman electrician, help start a peer sport mental health program. And eventually, after 16 and a half years, which was when they modified the guidelines, the high end of the guidelines the state had recommended, I filed for conditional pardon to the governor, which in
Mm,
Virginia was just a joke. Like four people every governor's term would get it for a campaign donation for, a
mm-hmm,
marijuana charge in
mm-hmm.
1970 or
Yep.
forgiveness of whatever. But I did it not thinking I would get out. I did it because I wanted to be able to have kind of like peace in myself for the rest of my time, knowing
Yep.
I had fought for my release and I'd done
Mm,
everything I could, and now I could just accept that there was nothing else I could do. And after 2.5 years, out of nowhere, literally one day, they call me in the counselor's office and tell me I'm going home in an hour and a half.
get
And
the f-
so there was
wow.
no re-entry journey.
Got you. Got you.
But early on, I'd been really fortunate. I had had somebody tell me, they said, "Look, you can make plans, but plans can fall apart." Like I
Definitely
think
can.
about somebody I know who was trained to play professional football, had everything, had the physicality, had everything, made it to college, first year of college, blew his knee out and was never going to play again and didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what to do. Like his whole life was kind of collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody told me every decision you make either creates more options for you or fewer. So make the decisions and take the path that creates more options. And that was how I lived. Every bit
I
of
like that.
education, everything was about let me have more options for myself. That included like when I worked prison jobs, like I worked in the law library, but I also worked maintenance. I also got a licensed electrician. I also worked in the factory. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
have as much varied experience so I could work in an office or I could work in a factory. I could crawl under a house. I could have all the options in front of me when I came out. And those
Yep.
two things I think prepared me more than anything.
I love that, bro. And I agree with you. I think I find that from talking with other individuals who've come from where we've come and been able to be successful, forever learning and experiences. Like that's the premise. And I know growing up we used to hear the saying, knowledge is power. And we probably, it sounds good, it sounds great, but when you really think about it, knowledge really is power. Us experiencing things, us learning, like that then creates the next opportunity for us. And it only happens when we make ourselves uncomfortable by pushing ourselves out of that space of being comfortable. And so I love that you were able to do all of those things. um I mean, kudos to you and congratulations, brother, even just for being able to get that pardon, because we know, I know, our listeners know it's not a very common thing that happens. Luck of chance of a few, but you were one of those few, and then you didn't squander that opportunity. So now you're released, just like that. Had no idea what happens next. What's next?
Yeah, I mean, part of it, I was overwhelmed, and when I go in to speak, like when I did at the graduation, I tell people, look, you know about the issues you're going to face with housing or employment or some of the social stuff. What you
Transportation.
may not realize is the kind of internal struggle you're going to have. Those days where you just don't want to get out of bed, or you don't know
Mm,
why, but you just feel like the world is crushing in on you, and you need to ask for help or you need to take space. And people tend to not talk about that, or especially, we say, no, I'm good. Like,
yep.
and it's
As
I
men.
just
Yep.
lost a friend recently, like in really tragic circumstances. He was a guy who always said, "No, no, I'm good." We'd be
Mm,
like, "No, no, how are you doing really?" "No, no, I'm good." Until one day he just wasn't. And I've seen that so often with guys. We've had a lot of overdoses. We've had a lot of suicides where people have just been good because they haven't been comfortable to reach out for help. And so I tell guys like that's a danger. Like
It is.
overdose is a danger. You know, hurting yourself is a danger. These lifestyles are a danger. It's not. You don't have to get back into the old life. Somebody doesn't have to be after you. We can do it to ourselves because we carry the stuff too tightly. And I'll say that's one of the things that I struggled with. But I knew coming out I had a lot of survivor's guilt because when they selected me, I was thinking like, yeah, I'm glad I'm going home, but what about all the other people who worked just as hard as I did, who are just as deserving, who aren't going home? And so it became my mission to go to the General Assembly in Virginia, to go advocate, to go speak on bills, to go meet with elected officials, to go help with reentry, to like make this my life and my mission.
That's
And
right.
in a way, I think that was beautiful, and it really set me up for success and allowed me to do a lot of good for other people. But in a way, it was an extension of my prison sentence. It was me
Mm,
feeling this
mm,
guilt and not being able to say, no, what do I want? Because it's really only been in the last 6 months that I've been able to say, like, yeah, I mean, this is great and I love doing the work, but what do I want? Like, where do I
mm,
want to be and what do I want to be doing? And
mm.
when I'm advocating for second chances for people, I'm not advocating for just people to stay locked in this box that they got put in when they were 18. I want people to go out and be doctors or lawyers or
Right.
run a horse
That's
farm or
right.
do whatever it is that
That's
they
right.
actually want to do, where they want their
Yes.
life to be.
Yes, and it's possible that everyone can have that for themselves, but it all does start with some of the things you've already mentioned today and the things we try to really get across on this platform. Like, yo, it's gonna the hope and the motivation have to be there, but also the confidence. You have to develop confidence in yourself, and that only happens by trying new things and learning new experiences. Um, and like you said, being able to talk to someone. Like I think as men, oftentimes we have to put on I was just talking to somebody yesterday, we have to put on this mask, and oftentimes that mask becomes our ego or how we look at ourselves, and then oftentimes then when things happen we never want to remove or take that mask off, and so now we're hiding, or we have all of this inside of us and we can't let it out. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly. And so you come home and you're dealing with all of these things. I'm sure was finding work difficult for someone who's now been incarcerated all of these years. And even though you have all of these certificates, what was that journey like for you?
So I was really lucky, and this is something I tell a lot of other people too, is that your network is your net worth. That whole catchphrase,
100%.
that's
Yep.
real.
Yep.
And so one of the other things I did while I was inside that I think paid off is I used to write letters every week, knowing 99% of those letters would never come back. But I would reach out to
Mm,
churches and community service boards and workforce and community centers and universities because I knew the more people I knew, the more opportunities I'd have.
that's fire,
And
bro.
and part of what made me my success a little bit easier was I had somebody on the outside managing a Facebook page for me. Because you got to remember, we didn't have Facebook when I got locked up. Like that
Mm,
wasn't a thing. But so I
mm,
would write essays and I would just write little opinion pieces. I would just put stuff out to the world. And I remember she wrote back. She was like, "Jesse, you realize you have 2,000 friends?" I was like, how is that possible? I don't know 2,000 people. But so when I got out, I remember my mom announced on my Facebook page the day she was going to pick me up. I had hundreds of messages saying, "Hey, do you need a job? Do you need a place to stay? Do you need
that's
tools? Do you need a
fire.
loan? Do you need like what do you need?" So because of the people that I had met and the relationships I'd built without even meeting people, just by like that kind of parasocial relationship, I had
Yeah.
opportunities. And there's an
Mm,
attorney who I'd done some research for when I worked in the law library. He was doing a case and he was like, "Hey, I don't want to pay my paralegal. I would rather like rely on you and then maybe help you out with something." When I got out, he was selling his house. He was retired. He was like moving into a care facility. He said, "I'm selling my house, but I need to fix it up. Like, would you help
mm,
me do some carpentry, help do some like touch up work around the place, and I'll pay you." And I think two things. One, I think he was trying to teach me about carpentry because he's been a carpenter his whole life, but he was old. He had a lot of back pain issues, and also I'd grown up with a dad who could fix anything, so I had
yep.
been exposed to it. So at
Yep.
the end of the day, he was like, "Man, I'm not sure what I can teach you, but like you're doing a good job. Let's pay you for finishing these projects and then get out." So I was
Mm,
really blessed to have like
mm,
2 weeks or 3 weeks of like my job is to go out in the country and like swing a hammer and then go sit down by the river and like look at the sky. And like I wasn't in the crazy factory like a lot of us were.
yeah.
So it
Yeah.
really gave me time to decompress and kind of get on my feet. But that way, I went into and you talk
Mm,
about like knocking on the door. I applied for a lot of jobs that I never got called back for. I applied for a lot of jobs that said no. And I applied for one job. This is my favorite story. So I go into work for the university because it's one of those huge, like $60 billion institutions. You get in the door, you got all the opportunity in the world.
yep.
And what I did was I put all my prison jobs on my resume because I hadn't
Yep.
been in the
Yep.
world for 20 years, so I had to have something. So
Yep.
I go in there and they're looking at my resume during my interview and they're like, "Yeah, I mean, we'd love to have you, but like you had a really good position at the DOC. Like, what made you leave?" And I'm like, "Oh, you don't understand. Like, I was in prison. I wasn't working there. Like, that's why I got out." And now I'm sitting across the table from three guys with their mouths open, like, what, do you still want the job? Like, well, we could talk about it. But I mean, it's about just showing up, and the letters that I wrote inside, the job applications I put in, the
Yeah.
emails I send, the calls I make. I know 99% of those calls aren't going to answer. They're going to tell me no, but all it takes is that one. And it's worth, like, if we can get through prison, if we can get through all that hopelessness, we can get through 99 no's to get to one yes.
About it, bro. Yo, that's probably one of the best sound advice I ever heard from anybody on the pod before. The fact that you said you were writing letters weekly, institution, workforce boards, just anybody expanding your network with no real anticipation of them writing back, with the mindset of I'm just trying to expand my network to create opportunities for myself later. Super fire. And then also the fact that you had someone running the social media page for you. So pushing content out, just keeping you relevant in the space, sharing some of the journey. So then that way, the day you come out, it created immediate opportunity for yourself. I mean, I think that's kind of why there's no coincidence why you didn't have to go right to the rat race. Like we said, like most people get caught up in that confinement because you kind of put a lot of the legwork in already. And I'm just a firm believer in life. You always get what you put out. Like life is a scale, and you don't have to be actually balancing or weighing. It's going to naturally weigh. The universe is going to do that. And so you were putting all of that work in before, not knowing when you were getting out, shooting your shot, and then when it happened, boom. And so to me, that's the definition of staying ready, because they say when you stay ready, you don't have to get ready because you're already ready. So I love that, bro. And so things are going good for you. You got you're doing pretty good for yourself. You're advocating for people. You're dedicating your life to that mission. Is that how you started your company, or how did that come about?
So the way I started the company is another, like, that's a bizarre thing. And I almost hesitate to say this because it doesn't happen to most people, just like the pardon doesn't happen to most people. I don't want to give them false hope, but I had spread this message around. I live in a small town, maybe like 150,000 people. And I went to a party. There was a podcast release party with all these journalists that I knew, and this person sat across from me and was like, "Hey, I hear you got an interesting story. Like, I want to hear it." And at that point, I had realized that local jobs. I'd taken a local job with a publisher, just something to kind of pay the bills. And I
Mm-hmm.
found out that my past was a liability. But if I could find a
Mm.
role where my past could be an asset, well, that's what I wanted. So I started applying for nonprofit jobs, for academic jobs, for higher ed and prison jobs, just like places where my lived experience would be a benefit. This person sits down across from me, literally starts taking notes, and I was like, these journalists are crazy. Like, I don't know what's going on, but all right. Starts going back and forth. I tell him about this place I had applied to. I was on the sixth round of interviews. You know how big
Mm.
nonprofits are, where you got to
Mm.
like 6 months of interviews and background checks and whatever.
Yeah.
And I told him, and I had started doing social media at this point. Like I had somebody publishing essays on Facebook, but I started making videos because somebody said you need to make videos. At this point, I think
Mm-hmm.
I had like 500,000 followers, like 5 months out, just because crazy stuff.
Come on now.
But so I was sitting down talking to them, and they asked me all these questions. They asked me what I cared about, what I thought was important, and went back and forth. And they told me, and I found out later who this person is, and they asked for anonymity. But this is like a hugely influential person, not just in this city, but like in the world. And this person said, "Look, I look a lot at kind of forecasting what's going to change the future, and the most important source of information right now is social media. Like that is
Mm.
going to shape the next generation. So I don't think you realize the opportunity and the obligation you have in the position you're
Mm-hmm.
in." But I explained this job and the round of interviews, and the next morning I get an email from him. And he said, "Hey, don't take this job. Here's why." And he clearly did like a deep background check about this organization, their funding sources, and their like what their output is. He said it's just going to waste your talent. And I believe this so strongly. I want you to
Mm.
start your own 501c3,
Mm.
start a nonprofit, go do something good in the world, and I will pay you whatever they would have paid you. And I just remember looking at this email and being like what? Like is
Is
this?
this a game? Yeah, yeah.
And it was real. Like literally, like we had a couple email exchanges. I mean, I set up the bank account. I got the 501c3 status, and like he transferred money in, and I was able to start working with people. And so then I was able to say, okay, well, I want to do the reentry work we've been talking about. I want to work with the kids in the juvenile center. I want to do this workforce training. I want to do this advocacy. I'm going to do this storytelling. Like I've got a meeting on Friday with Virginia DOC. We've done a couple things with them. I've done a lot of speaking, but we've got a couple programs on proposal. We're just trying to figure out how to get these things into place.
Yep.
And it really was just because I kept knocking on doors and I kept talking to people. Again, never expect, like I had no idea who this person was, but I was going to show up. I was going to give them my attention. I was going to give them kind of like the best effort, and then I was going to keep it moving until I found the next person. It just happened to
Right.
be the right person at the right time.
Man, and look at that. And look how the universe has blessed you. Like, and I know you said it could give false hope because it's rarity, But I find that the people that work hardest, we create good luck for ourselves too, in that same way. And so I believe that when you find your mission, you're working your purpose, when you're putting your head down every single day and grinding and putting the work in, not caring about when you're going to get to the destination, just enjoying the voyage. I find that you get better and better luck, and things that seem uncommon to most end up happening or being common and for individuals. And so I don't think it's by chance that these things have happened. I think there's a larger vision there for you, brother, that you've already been able to captivate and do. And so I see behind you, you have the YouTube plaque. I know you talk about a large a social media following. What have you been able to do in the social media spaces to really spread your voice and impact?
It's, I mean, I ended up with like 1.3 million on TikTok, 100 some thousand, like the numbers. And who knows what that translates to? Because just because you got that many followers, that many subscribers, doesn't mean that many people watch the video. But what it means to me is I've realized how important it is to share the message as wide as possible that, like, we aren't defined by the worst moment of our lives. And the person getting out of prison may not be the person you think based on some Hollywood movie or some idea. So being able to reach out and connect with people in all walks of life from all backgrounds and say, like, hey, you might be surprised at the people who are still inside. And I'll tell stories about some of the people and like this guy, and I'll tell the story and they'll be like, wait, what college is he at or what university? I'm
Mm,
like, no, he's at Buckingham Correctional Center right now.
right.
And he's
That's
read
right.
more books than anybody I know. And he's written more basically dissertations than anyone I
Talk about
know.
it.
One of the
Talk.
most brilliant people who just needs that chance to be on the other side. And by doing that, it may not affect achieve an immediate goal on the small term, but it's trying to change the narrative, trying to change the way people see incarceration, and being the face of that or being a face of that has allowed me to have a lot of conversations in spaces that other people wouldn't be, because there's a lot of basis, there's a lot of bias, there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of
100%.
prejudice. And when I
100%.
show up and somebody's like, wait, like you were in prison for violent crimes and you're doing well now, but you could be my grandson or you could be my
Right.
nephew or you could
Right.
be, and it's like, yeah, and there are a lot of people, whether they look like me or not, who are just like me inside. And
Right.
it starts that conversation in a way that it will open the door to,
Mm,
I've had people
mm.
change secondhand hiring employment what do you call it, like policies, had people change the way they rent to individuals. I've had people talk about how they want to go advocate to their chamber of commerce. Like,
Yep.
it's just started conversations, and I don't know what the end ripple effect is, but I want people to know that things don't have to be the way they are, and that people on the inside are not what you're thinking they are.
Talk about it, brother. Man, that's literally the like why I love this platform. I get to meet some amazing people from all around the country, and the sentiment is the same. The work you're doing in Virginia, the work we're doing in New York, the work that some of our past guests are doing in LA or Chicago or you name it. And we have these the thing I love most is I believe the people closest to the problem are also the people closest to the solution. And so when we continue to see all of this great work that's taking place around the nation, I want our listeners to know that your story, your words, your impact could be next. You could be the one that come home and influence your community, your neighborhood, your state, our country. And it's all of us. Like it really takes all of us because we understand it because we've been there. And we're just trying to tell you guys that you too can use your voice in the same manner. And so I know you have the book, The Best Part of Prison. Tell us a little bit about that.
So it's kind of a clickbaity title, and for people on the inside, like, clickbait is something you put on the internet that, like, you don't really care about, but they make it interesting enough. You're going to click on that. You're going to click on that link or that YouTube channel. But it's, none of us think of prison as a good thing. I'm not saying prison is a good thing, but I think it draws in the interest of, like, what is the best part of a bad experience, or what can we
Hmm.
make the best part of a bad experience? And I truly believe that every obstacle I've faced, every challenge, every negative experience has been an opportunity for growth for me. And I choose to look at it that way. Like, every time somebody cuts me off in traffic and I get mad, I say thank you. It's an opportunity to reflect. Like, every
Mm.
time something goes bad, I lose some money or I lose a contract, or I've lost a friend. I try to look at that as an opportunity. Like, I can show up better in the future. I can be more proactive in the future. And if I look at it as an opportunity, there's never anything to just grieve like it's been a bad thing. There's never anything to feel sorry for myself about. There's never any reason to stop moving forward, because everything just creates more opportunities for growth and more opportunities for betterment. And so I wrote this for a couple reasons. One, because even at the end of the day, I still didn't really understand my whole story. Like, how did I end
Mm.
up in that place? What was
Mm.
this childhood stuff that I hadn't unpacked? What was this stuff? But also, then, like, how did I turn around in a place where most people end up more broken and somehow I left more full and more whole?
Mm.
And then the third part was that I wanted, just like that guy who came back in to speak to us, I wanted people inside to know that they're not forgotten. And that's why we made a deal with the publisher that 500 physical copies and through Emilio and Adovo, unlimited digital copies are available free of
Oh,
charge behind
let's
bars. So if you're
go.
locked up and you're in a system that has access, you can read this book for free because I want people to know that they matter and they have a future.
Yes, I love that, bro. That's absolutely wonderful and beautiful. And so, guys, if you're listening to this and you're on the Adovo app, obviously, then go ahead, and one of the first things I want you to do is go ahead and go check out Jesse's book, The Best Part of Prison. A lot more jewels will be provided there. Um, so Jesse, is there anything, what's next? What's in the future for you guys? I know you said you in the space, what's in the future, but then also you said something earlier that I found a little interesting when you said, in the last 6 months or so, you're really starting to ask yourself more, what does Jesse want to do? And so it's a two-part question. What's next for the company and your vision for that? And then what's next just for Jesse?
Yeah, like I said, we're meeting with DOC this week. We're looking at a couple programs. We're looking at a storytelling training so that we can have people on the inside learn how to do media and also do the
Mhm.
storytelling for what's working in the system so we can have kind of a more positive narrative or message out there. We're looking at doing more speaking engagements, more trainings. I actually got asked to be a professor for our college education class, and I was like, I don't have a PhD, and they were like, look, we'll figure it out. So we'll see if that actually happens. But if I could teach classes inside, that would be meaningful. We got a bunch of things like I just got approved to bring horses, therapy horses, into the juvenile detention center on our family day. We've got a
Mm,
day where we bring the families and the kids and community resources together so that not only the kids can be connected, but often, the families are struggling too. So we connect them with resources so that everybody can leave with more opportunities, end of the day. We're going to bring the therapy horses in because I think it'll be good for the families and good for the kids.
that's awesome.
And that, so on that side of it, that's one of the things I realized is, I have a mentor who's been really instrumental to my kind of success or my just like staying centered. And she said one time, she said, Jesse, I've seen you around animals, and I think that's something you should do, like whether
Mm,
it's as a job or. So as soon as we get done here, I'm going out to a horse farm where I'm going to ride, but also they do speech therapy for nonverbal kids with autism. And so I'm going to go groom the horses. I'm going to go lead for the rides for the therapy. Like it's just something that fills my cup. And I
yeah.
think for the last, 4.5, almost 5 years, I've been so focused on the mission and moving forward and making progress that I haven't stopped to figure out what really fills my cup.
Hmm.
And being out in the middle of nowhere in rural Virginia with some horses and knowing that I'm helping, that I'm part of something that's bigger than me, like that's what fills my.
Come on, bro. I love that. Absolutely love that. And so, can you tell everyone where we could find? Actually, I don't think I asked you. So what is everything that your company does today?
So we're doing right now, we're focused on the juvenile detention center. We had a national mentoring program. We had a bunch of other things. But what I realized is a lot of people in this nonprofit space and the service space are concerned more with optics than they are with outcome. I
Talk
see
about
people
it,
raise
bro.
money and have
Talk about it.
campaigns and throw galas and not do a thing. Made
Talk
all
about
this
it.
money. And so
Yep.
when we looked at the data for our mentoring program, like it wasn't leading to positive results. We thought it was a great idea. We thought it was, and we got like national press about it, but we couldn't show the data. And I said, well, look, I don't want to
Mm,
do something that isn't actually helping people. I don't care
performative.
how much money we can
Yep.
raise, how much we can do. So we kind of pulled back. So we're mostly focused on the juvenile detention center where we do the leadership summits every month. We do the family days. We bring in kind of speakers around workforce and around academia. We basically create opportunities for the kids and help kind
Hmm.
of navigate them back to the street.
Yep.
Like I said, we're looking at stuff with the DOC. We're looking at how we could do like a statewide impact. But also, one of the things that I want to do is I want to get to the point where I step back and I'm on the board and I let somebody else kind of do the day-to-day work.
Hmm.
And I want to
Hmm.
find a way to be like financially secure and comfortable. And so
Yeah.
I've got a couple opportunities
Yeah.
on the table. I'm currently the program director for restorative justice program. So we do court diversion in Charlottesville, Albemarle. So like I spend my day hanging out with prosecutors trying to keep people out of prison. Like how can we come to a different
I
alternative,
love that.
outcome?
I love that.
Um, but yeah, I don't know what the end of it looks like. I got a couple things on the table or a couple offers in front of me, and I'm going to see what that looks like. But yeah, for the most part, what I'm trying to do is continue, like, start something like with the book that's going to be around forever, the nonprofit that can kind of continue to do the work. And I want to take a little bit of time, whatever that is, to get my bank account right, get my comfort right, like fill my cup, make sure I'm in a good place, so that whatever I do after that, I'm doing from a place of fullness.
I love that, bro. I think that's great advice for anybody, right? And I think some of the things by us filling our cup back up, I like to always use the idea or the thought process for anyone who's flown before. We know they tell you to put the mask on yourself first before you help anybody. I think that's the definition of you doing that, putting the mask on yourself first. I think also it also goes back to, and people don't really tell people this, but I tell people this, that I mentor, I coach, I help. You got to be stingy, man. And when it comes to taking care of yourself, you got to be stingy, and you got to pour into yourself way more than you could pour into anybody else. And so whatever it is to get your mental right, keep your physical right, keep your spiritual right, like all of those things that'll keep you going strong, you got to pour into that and be stingy. And a lot of times people don't tell you that. They tell you got to do all of this other stuff for others. But how can I do all of that for someone else if I can't do for myself first? And so I love that you are building you're building generational things that will hopefully outlive all of us and be able to impact people for years to come, but also pouring into yourself at the same time, learning how to do that. And so, Jesse, tell everyone where they could find you at. A lot of our listeners, if you do any, I don't know if you already do anything like with Securus. I heard you say Adovo, but if you have access on any of those platforms for communication, drop that information or email addresses, and people will even write physical letters, being that we have people all over. So tell people where they could find you in your socials and things of that nature.
Sure. Jesse Crosson, Second Chancer is the title that I use on TikTok and Facebook and YouTube and all the places. We've got second-chancer.org is a nonprofit. Again, we're mostly focused on local things for today. That may change in the future if we go back to a national scale. JesseCrosson.com is where I have all the stuff around the book and speaking and coaching. And yeah, I've got a physical address on there, P.O. Box 6755, Charlottesville, Virginia 22906. And that's one of the things. So I had been on Getting Out and Secure, some of the other ones. I remember one day I logged in, I had 1,001 messages, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, bro, I got like a job and a life. I just can't
I
do
can't
it.
do
And
it.
so
Yeah,
I stopped putting it out there just because I don't want to make a false promise. Like I don't want
I'm
to tell
with you.
people I can respond when I just don't have the capacity to do it.
I'm with you.
But I have been like, I work with families. I actually have a meeting, I think tomorrow or Tuesday, with a family that has somebody who's facing charges and somebody else who's coming home. And I said, look, I can give you 15 minutes, go over the basics, then I can try to connect you with resources. But I get
Mm-hmm.
so many of those things of outreach. And like, if that was my full time job, I'd love to do it. But like, I can't pay the bills and do
Yep.
another job
Yep.
and do that. So,
Yep.
like you said, I tell people all the time, and you got to figure out a way to find something that's sustainable, because otherwise you'll come out and you'll burn out and you'll end up being one of those statistics that we all feel terrible about, but that is really kind of perpetuated by the
So
nonprofit
true.
industrial complex.
So true, bro. So true. And so, Jesse, one question that we always ask our viewers at the very end is this. And so I want to ask you the same. So if we go back to that 18-year-old Jesse, before he ended up catching the charge and getting himself that sentence, um, knowing the things you know today, the things you've lived through, your lived experience, what was one piece of advice that you would go back to your younger self and prepare yourself for or tell yourself?
I don't know that he would have listened. And it's, when I go talk to kids in the juvenile center, I know that I'm planting a lot of seeds and most of them aren't going to sprout. But I
Hmm.
would have told him to slow down. That he was
Hmm.
on a rush to get to somewhere, to something. He was running from this darkness he felt like was inside. He felt like he had to be somewhere else. And if he could just slow down long enough, because it happened to me when I was in an isolation cell. They locked me up, no phone calls, no visits, no anything for 90 days. I'm just like stuck in a cell staring at the wall. And it was the first time I had faced those things. If I'd be
Mm,
able to face them on the outside and realize like it didn't kill me, that I could wake up the next day and I could keep going and I could find a way forward. So I'd
mm,
tell that 18-year-old kid to like slow down. Like you don't need to be in a rush. Slow down, sit down, like take a breath. Because I think I was running so far and so fast from 16 to even sometimes that I was in prison, that like all I really needed to do was slow down and stop and reevaluate. And if I could do it from a different place, I would have made different decisions.
love it. You guys heard it here first from Jesse Crosson. The importance of slowing down a little bit. And so for our viewers today, today's episode was a really great journey where you got to hear about someone who was sentenced to over 30 something years of incarceration as a teenager, who ended up having an opportunity to be released at the drop of a dime through a pardon, and has gone on to now build lasting foundational things to uplift and help others, hopefully for years to come. And again, this is just another story of inspiration. It's a story I hopefully leaves you guys motivated to know what's possible. But I encourage you guys to take a second listen, because Jesse also shared a lot of jewels that could be applied into the things you're doing right now, like being a forever learner and getting as many certificates as possible, taking advantage of higher ed. And so, as always, we're just here to try to hopefully motivate and inspire. We really appreciate you guys spending some time with us today. Jesse, thank you for all of the insights, for you being just so sharing your story and being able to share it the way you did. And we really appreciate you. And for our listeners, continue to be safe and take a day at a time. And like Jesse said, sometimes let's just slow down a bit. Have a good one, guys.